The truth is, I actually didn't want to write a book. With a little bit of encouragement from some of my peers, I said, okay, I'm going to turn this into a book that I want to focus on founders. I'm a big believer in the power of play and the importance of toys, and that toys are a part of our development as humans. We're becoming creative, we're learning how our interactions, and we're problem solving. Businesses are ideas. They start with an idea, they start with a thesis, and then it's a series of experiments to see if you can actually prove it through. We're not human doings or human havings, we're human beings. Therefore, the most important thing for us to be thinking, who do I need to become that can write a book, who can build a business, who can make impact for my family and my community?
Hey, Chandler Bolt here, and joining me today is Mr. Brad Pedersen. Brad, I've known Brad for a long time. We went on snowboarding trips for years, heli and cat snowboarding trips with Dan Martell and a bunch of other really cool people. And just a super accomplished entrepreneur, angel investor, thought leader, business coach. In 2008, he founded and scaled one of Canada's top toy companies called Tech for Kids. And then they merged to create a company called Basic Fun, which was a maker of one of the world's most iconic toys, which is, if you know Brad, he's a very understated guy. So it's like, I feel like I knew a lot about Brad. I somehow did not know this for years. Because since then, in 2018, they co-founded Pila Cases, new category, sustainable smartphone covers, essentially, that are compostable and biodegradable. And I've had one on my phone for years now. They scaled that business over $100 million in revenue and then launched a big Kickstarter for a product called Lomi, which is the world's first waste kitchen composter. And they crowdfunded about it looks like just shy of 10 million for that. I think it was an Indiegogo campaign, hugely successful campaign. And then now, kind of parlaying off of all that stuff, he's the author of a book called Startup Santa. And so it's a toy maker's tale of 10 lessons learned from timeless toys. So teaching entrepreneurs what he learned from that process. So it's a long way of saying, like, really sharp innovator, really great entrepreneur, business mind, just really great person. So we got a lot to unpack on this interview. We'll talk book stuff. We'll talk invention stuff. It's going to be fun. Brad, welcome. Great to have you here.
Chandler, so great to be here. I got to get you to do all my PR introductions. I mean, I don't think anybody's ever done it that well. So my head's swelling a little bit, actually. So thank you.
Oh, man. Well, I want to start with, obviously, you're an accomplished, innovator, creator, like kind of creating all these products. Why a book as your most recent, like, kind of quote unquote product, if you will? And how does this book fit in with your goals, with your business, all that stuff?
Yeah. Great question. The truth is, I actually didn't want to write a book. And there's kind of three reasons I didn't want to write a book. Number one is you just gave me this very storied introduction of all these highlight reel of my life. But the truth is, I'm an entrepreneur who has had a lot of failings, gone through bankruptcy, not only once, but 3 times. So I've seen some low lows when it comes to business. So I had some shame that I just was like, well, I don't think that there's a lot of value I can bring in light of some of those things that happened in my past. Secondly, it seemed incredibly daunting, like writing a book. I know about myself as an entrepreneur, I'm really good at starting things and finishing things. It's that messy middle that I don't do so well in. And this seemed like a lot of messy middle, and I can confirm it really is a lot of messy middle. It's there.
True story.
Yeah, true story. And third was, I already felt like the world was kind of noisy. There was a lot of other thought leaders and books and podcasts and things out there. Would anybody really benefit from having more people in the conversation? So where I landed was that, okay, I'm going to write a memoir because in my 30 years as a toy maker, I need to kind of capture some of the stories because it's been a bit of a story, Forrest Gump kind of story with some crazy things that have happened. I thought I just got to write this out and unpack some of the lessons from it. And kind of a crazy thing happened along the way. Number one, I discovered there's something called narrative therapy, where as you write, you actually process and you heal. And I actually found myself going through, in moments of writing my book, I was actually in tears because I was just kind of reflecting and then like closing loops and, kind of thinking, just correlating my ideas. And this is what it meant and how I was letting it land on me in things that I just kind of like moved on from, but never really fully unpacked. Right. And then second is people like Dan Martell, friend of ours, said, "Hey, I hear you're writing something. Do you want to share it with me?" So share a chapter with him. And he comes back to me and says, "Brad," he gives me that look, "Brad, you'd be doing the world a disservice if you didn't share this." So with a little bit of encouragement from some of my peers, I said, okay, I'm going to turn this into a book that I want to, focus on founders, kind of twofold: founders that are just starting out and, can, benefit from the wisdom of my wounds. And that would be my first sort of avatar for this. And the second is maybe some founders who've, got some battle scars and some wounds and maybe feeling a little fatigued and defeated. And that this would be something that they could relate to because they're not alone. I understand that I'm a subscribing member to that AA group. So that is why this book is out. And, I'm hopeful that it's going to land on those people and make a positive impact in them.
That's cool. And so obviously the book is called Startup Santa. You talked about writing that for, entrepreneurs and, who have been through tough, challenging times, which is really synonymous with the word entrepreneur. It's like who hasn't? Can you tell us about like kind of how did you decide? Because it feels like it's maybe, in some ways part memoir, but then also it's part like, hey, this is practical lessons learned. So how did you, I feel like that's something that often people struggle with. It's like, okay, I want to tell a book about my story, but should I just do the story part? Is it memoir? Is it nonfiction? Is it somewhere in between? Like, how did you land on that and what you feel like would be most helpful for the reader?
Yeah, look, it's a creative process. Like what I started with is nowhere near where it finished in terms of unleashing the creative idea. And this is what I think is interesting about the creative process in general. Like you start with curiosity and then you apply creativity to it. And then you have the courage to actually lean into it. And as you're doing that, you start to go, oh, hey, what if we did this? What if we changed that? So it was a memoir. And as I was going through and doing the memoir, I started to say, hey, wait a minute, I was a toy maker. I'm a big believer in the power of play and the importance of toys, and that toys are a part of our development as humans. That, when we're growing up, a toy is a medium that promotes play. And when we're playing, we're developing three things. We're becoming creative, we're learning how our interactions, and we're problem solving. And so why don't I take some of these iconic toys and tell a little bit of the backstory of the toys, and then tell what they're teaching us. Like, what is it they're teaching us? And then take one of my stories, one of the things that I went through. Typically, we don't learn from success. It tends to be a sucky teacher, but one of the things I failed at, and then tie those lessons together. So the book takes you through 10 of those experiences through 10 different toys. And actually there's 11 because I add a bonus chapter in there. And I think it's a fun way to tie together these concepts in something that we can relate to, because we can all relate as kids. Yeah. Christmas morning, you woke up and there was that thing that you were like, wow, that's so cool. It was all the possibilities around the play that was going to be experienced through that thing. So that's cool. That's the emphasis.
I love that structure. That's really cool. And were all of these 11 toys, were these all ones that you created? Was it some that you created, some that others created?
Yeah, only one toy was one we created. Okay. So the rest are all based on toys that were iconic. So I did not create G.I. Joes. That was Hasbro. Yeah. Monopoly. That's also Hasbro. So there's Mattel, Hasbro, Lego. They're the dominant companies that make a lot of these toys, and they are to this day the dominant companies out there. But they're iconic toys that you will relate to. You'll remember the moments that you interacted with them. You had them. Your kids might have them. It'll be a meaningful connection.
That's cool. And which one was the one that you created? And can you give us like maybe beyond that, the top 2 or 3? Because Brett was talking about this last week. He's like, man, he created this and he created this and he created this. And I'm like, and so I know you're a humble guy, but can you what were these big ones that you created, and what's the one that gets featured in the book?
Yeah. So the most iconic toy that I was involved in is Lite Bright. So most of you would know Lite Bright. You probably know Tonka as another brand that is fairly iconic. So those are part of Basic Fun, which was a company I co-founded, and they still are to this day. They also do brands like Care Bears and Connects. So those are all, I think, pretty iconic toys. The one in the book that I feature is none of those. It's actually Mashems. And Mashems were a collectible that were squishy toys. And we basically took this idea that stress balls were sort of popular, and I call it the mid to late 2000s. And then fidget toys started to become a thing, if you remember that craze. And we created these liquid filled squishy toys made out of iconic licensed characters. And we got super lucky in that we had licensed it with Angry Birds back when Angry Birds was just becoming a thing. And that kind of created the initial momentum. And then from there, we ended up licensing with all the major properties you can imagine: Marvel, Warner Brothers, My Little Ponies. I mean, pretty much every character you can imagine. By the time I left the toy business, we had sold over 500 million units around the planet. So it was one of those rare moments of seeing something go from small to massive numbers very fast. It doesn't happen often, but when it happens, it's very exciting. And it continues to this day. It's still a brand that's in the marketplace that you can still go find at major retailers.
Wow. 500 million units. That's incredible. What on the innovator side of things, like how do you invent and create these products? I mean, it's like a loaded question. It's like we need 5-hour podcasts to just scratch the surface probably. But I mean, it just seems like from the toys to pillowcases to Lomi, like this is obviously in your DNA. And I don't know that I got that same DNA. What tips do you have, or what, like, I don't know, how would you describe like that core kind of skill set of what it takes to invent, products that stick?
Well, first of all, let me just go back and say that I am not supposed to be doing this. I was not supposed to be a creator in toys. Like, I grew up on the prairies of Canada, where we're known for oil and agriculture. And there was no toy companies in my background. My parents were actually chiropractors. That's what I was going to do. So it made no sense that I ended up in the toy business. So I just want to kind of start there from a baseline. And by the way, I didn't work at a toy company ahead of time. I actually wish I had. That's my one regret in life. It would have saved me a bunch of pain, a lot of challenges along the way. But I've come up with this sort of like framework that I call the Courage Flywheel. And the way I think about it, it starts with curiosity. We're curious about something. And as kids, we're designed to be curious and to, we see a caterpillar on the ground, we see a leaf that is colorful or something that just captures our imagination. That's the curiosity piece. And then when we spend time in curiosity, creativity flows out of that, because we start getting creative with what we could do and the possibilities of extending that. And I think that's part of our God-given imagination to project the future. Everything's created twice, first in our minds, and then we manifest it physically if we follow the third step, which is courage, the willingness to try, the willingness to lean in, to attempt things. And we got to be willing to suck before we can become successful. It's just, there is no other way around it. I mean, Michael Jordan had to be a poor dribbler before he could become a great dribbler, poor shooter before he could become an expert shooter. And that's just the way life is. You have to be willing to start small and not good until you eventually build mastery in it. But on the other side of courage, because you're probably going to make mistakes, you're going to face challenges. That's just guaranteed. And we were kind of joking about entrepreneurship is like hard. And for those entrepreneurs who tell me they haven't seen hard things yet, I said, you just haven't lived long enough. It's coming. Don't worry. It'll find you. So challenges, which in turn, you can choose those challenges to actually define you or to refine you. And if they refine you, they build your character. And as your character develops and you build more grit, tenacity, wisdom as a result of that, that creates confidence. And confidence is what leads to more curiosity again. And that flywheel just continues to go around and around. And you just want to continue to grow what I call your courage flywheel, if you just do that enough times. So with toy creating, I mean, I started off in toy distribution. That was my start there. Somebody else made the toys. I just did the distribution. I crashed and burned that company. That forced me to reimagine and choose again. I went into toy manufacturing. Toy manufacturing required a completely different skill set, but I'd learned a few things in the initial company that I could then apply to the second company in terms of sales and marketing. And now I had to learn skill sets around design, manufacturing, development. And look, I think today it's never been easier than ever to be a creator. Like the tools that are available to all of us today that are just open source. If you decide that you have an idea in your mind, if you're curious about something and your imagination can project something highly creative, it's never been an easier time to actually lean into that to try and create something and use it. Like I used to have to spend $50,000, $60,000 on a prototype. Now you can go to a 3D printing lab and print something off for like a few bucks, like just to see if it might be cool. So
Yeah.
it's the options and optionality have never been higher and greater for anybody who's a creator.
That's good. I love that framework too. That's slick. So you said, I just want to make sure I got it right. You said curiosity, courage, challenges that build character, that build confidence, and then back into curiosity. Is that right?
Close. You almost got it right. Curiosity leads to creativity, right?
I
And
see.
this is, God-given, like we're called to be creators, right? From there, we have the courage, right? We then will face challenges, which then build our character. And if we work through that, it creates more confidence and clarity. Even you get out of 7th if you wanted, but I think 6 is good enough. And it just keeps coming around to give you curiosity again. So, hey, let's use that when we go snowboarding together, right?
Yes.
You're curious if you could actually do a big air, right? So then you get kind of thinking about, well, how would I have to position my body before I launch? Which side of the hit am I going to go straight off? Going to go to side angle? So then you apply that creativity. You have the courage to actually do it. The first time, you probably don't get it right. You maybe tomahawk. Right?
Maybe. Hypothetically, theoretically, that may have happened to me.
But the point is that challenge helped build your character, and that gave you more confidence. And guess what? I saw you totally air it next time and stomp it, right?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. The real challenge is Dan shaking you up and saying, Chandler, that was not good. This is dangerous. Will someone else ride with him? But that was a real challenge, and it gave me, it did give me character. And then after a while, a little bit of confidence.
Confidence. Man, and then you get curious again about, well, maybe this time I can do like a switch 180, right?
Yeah. Maybe in January on our next trip. I'm assuming, is this flywheel or framework in some capacity? Is this in the book?
It's in the book. Yeah.
All right. Great.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, so guys, obviously get the book, Startup Santa, learn about the flywheel. 10 business lessons learned from timeless toys. Let's talk about the kind of the innovator brain that we just talked about with you creating all these products. What did you learn from that helped you create a better book?
That's an interesting question. Look, let me step back and just say that one of the things I open up the book with is talking about the attributes, the admirable attributes of kids. And if you think about it, kids are, they're imaginative, they're hopeful, they're faithful, they're enthusiastic. They represent all the things that we as humans would call it our best attributes to promote possibility. And you think about it as a kid, anything's possible. Like I was going to learn to fly. I was going to be, climbing mountains, and there was no limits to the possibilities. And I actually believe that when Jesus called us to be like little children, I think he really meant embody these attributes. Don't lose them. Because Ben Franklin said most people die at age 25. They just wait to 70 to get buried. And what I feel happens is that we lose that zest for life. And like when you see someone, like for instance, since Dan is in our group, and even as I look at you on the other side of this camera, eyes are the windows of the soul. And when you look in someone's eyes, you can tell if they're alive. Like when I mean alive, like not just breathing, but they're truly living an abundant life. Like they're thriving, they're excited, they're leaning into the possibilities. And on the flip side, you can see people who have numbed out just by the fact that their eyes no longer twinkle. And it's a part of something we all face, is that as kids, everything's possible. And then we start facing resistance. We're told what we can't do, stop, don't do, we fail, we make mistakes. And we just start to layer on these layers of apathy that we get to a point where we're just in motion. We're in effect versus at cause. So I say all that to say that I think it's really important that we all understand that this is a part of our human experience and that we work against it, knowing that it's the natural tendency to migrate there. Like gravity weighs us down. We naturally migrate to destructive behavior patterns. Like my mom didn't have to teach me how to say bad words. That came natural. or steal cookies from the cookie jar. Again, that came really natural. But to actually live a life of abundance and to be thriving and to be exploring possibilities requires you to lean in and to be engaged and to not lose those important childlike attributes of possibility and faithfulness and hope. And so as I think about, the creative process, in order for you to truly unleash your creative genius, you have to have those childlike attributes intact and not let them wither and not become apathetic. And apathy, the root of that actually means loss of passion. And you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, right? When you're apathetic, you've lost passion. And we really knowing, like my coach says to me all the time, a skilled hunter knows how to hunt, but the master hunter knows how he is hunted. So if we know that apathy is something that we will just gradually drift towards unless we're working against it, just like if I don't look after my health, I will just naturally drift away to being unhealthy. That's just the way it is. So we have to work at it. We have to constantly reinvest, lean in, focus on how we can continue to be engaged and be at cause versus in effect.
Oh, interesting. At cause versus in effect. I like that concept. I hope you're loving this episode so far. So if you're serious about writing and publishing your book, we would love to chat with you and help create a custom plan. All right. So all you need to do right now is go to selfpublishing.com/schedule. Schedule a 45-minute consultation with one of the experts on my team. All right. Let's implement what you're learning in this episode and let's see how we can help with your book. Go to selfpublishing.com/schedule. You talked about the childlike curiosity. How do you do that? I think it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to live it. Because I feel like there's these things growing up where you're like, oh, I'll never be like that. I just remember it's like things that my dad would do that would drive me crazy. I'm just like, oh, I'll never. Me and my mom would laugh. And it's just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I'll never be like that. And then you start growing up and you're like, oh shoot, I'm like that. And not even that that's bad in of itself, but I think that as that relates to like getting jaded or less curious or more rigid in your ways, it almost feels like the cause effect thing, like it's a default on, not default off thing. Like I find myself like, oh yeah, we tried that, didn't necessarily work. Or like, just like, it feels like little things like that creep in. So it's easy to theoretically understand that, but then hard to actually implement it. How do you do that? And how have you done that kind of throughout the course of your career, whether it's creating toys, products, books?
Yeah. Or, products that are going to change the world in a positive way.
Right.
Which, by the way, I use toy factories to make the products. So like the same people I worked with in creating toys are the same people who are involved in creating Peel a Case as well as Lummi. But
that's cool.
In the book, I talk about a framework that I think is really helpful to kind of think about it. But again, it's sort of thinking through that, okay, understand that how do we know the propensity of our humanity is to, again, gravity weighs down and we will naturally drift towards apathy if we don't actively work against it. So I talk about the quality of life quadrant. And the idea being is that engagement from 0 to high engagement, satisfaction from 0 to high satisfaction. And we all start off in life as the rookie, where we have high engagement, but low satisfaction because we have nothing. We're bootstrapping from our basement, but we're inspired because we see the possibilities. But what happens from that point forward determines how we land in one of three quadrants. And we may end up in all three quadrants at some point during our life. So the first is in the bottom corner where you have low engagement and low satisfaction. And those people are the victims. And those are the people that are actually in effect. In other words, they are defined by what happens instead of refined by what happens. It's easier for them to blame a person or a situation for their circumstances in life than it is to actually take ownership. And the problem with that is that you actually give up your power to something or someone else. You are no longer, it's a nice excuse like, well, I am this way because of that, but you no longer have the power to actually make anything possible in your life. And unfortunately, in today's society, there's so much victimhood. Like that is just, there's people who have just claimed, I drive on the highways here in Florida and I see billboards out, so-and-so got me millions of dollars. Well, I guess it was profitably a victim in this case, right? So I'm not saying there isn't, there is some legitimate victims situation, but the vast majority of people just go to that by default, that they are a victim of some situation there. And those people suffer from what I call the 4 Bs. They are blind to how they were involved. in the process of landing where they are. They're begrudging other people because they see other people that it didn't happen to them. They're comparing. And when you compare, you despair. So they're comparing. So they're begrudging that person. They blame other people and other circumstances for what happened. And ultimately, they have bitterness. They're super bitter people. And I think it was Nelson Mandela saying, trying to harm your opponent by being bitter against them is like trying to drink poison to kill them. The only person you're only going to harm is yourself. So that is the first place you get end up, is being this person, a victim. The second spot, which is, call it reasonable satisfaction, but low engagement. Those are the bystanders. And those are the people who maybe they start off, they get some initial success, they go through life, but their comfort zone is only going to stretch so far and they don't want to get on the other side of it. So they choose to just not do the most or not to explore the most. They just stay contained within their comfort zone. And they start to define the quality of life by their power they have, the possessions that they have, the power they have, the possessions, the pleasure that they're able to indulge in, and or the prestige of the status that they are in society. And those people ultimately are the people who know it all, show it all, and owe it all, right? But ultimately where we want to get to is high satisfaction and high engagement. And this is where the champions are. And this is like people that are a hero's journey. And they're the people who really focus on what I call the 4 C's, where they understand the most meaningful things in life all to come down to how they create important memories, like going to baldface. So they are thinking about, from the 4 C's, challenges, things that they overcame, running a marathon, doing a 360 on their surfboard, doing something that is truly a challenge you've been trying to, it's got high satisfaction to it, right? Creativity, where they build something, they take their creative genius, unleash it, and they make toys or devices that are going to turn organic matter into dirt, or painting of some sort, right? Charity, where they're giving of their time and their money, their resources to make a difference in someone's life. And ultimately connections with people, making magic memories with those that matter. And that ultimately is what I think we all want to try and strive for, and continue to, just be aware that at any time we could be in any one of those brackets. But if we want to ultimately live out the hero's journey, we want to know that we're leaning into life, that we have high engagement, but also high satisfaction, because we're pushing our possibilities and we're expanding our comfort zone, and knowing that, hey, we're doing more than we even thought was possible. Like, I'm sure you as an entrepreneur, as a founder, can relate to the fact that you're probably at a place that if you went back 10 years from now, it'd be hard for you to envision you being here. It was just you taking the risk to lean into the possibilities that actually allowed for that to happen.
I love that. And I don't know if people can see this on the video, but I love that. It's like the Zoom audio, you're getting animated, and it's like Brad just raised his hand. Yeah, that's awesome.
Right.
Oh man. I love all the frameworks. It's clear. And I think, you talked about narrative therapy. I've actually never even heard of that, but I just always joke that, writing a book is like free therapy. So maybe that's what you're talking about, is narrative therapy, actually, is probably what it's called, but it's just the therapeutic process of writing and creating. You work through all this stuff, but it also, I think a great benefit is it helps you create frameworks. And maybe this is just how you think, but it's just like, there's been 3, 4, 5 frameworks on this interview alone that I've thought to myself, that's good. And I can't help but wonder and think that maybe that got distilled and sifted throughout the creation process of this book, which I think is a really cool kind of benefit of going through the process.
I can 100% confirm that that's true. Like, literally, yeah. The process of writing. Actually, I heard somebody say this before, and I can identify it. I write to learn what I think, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of relate to that. I was writing and actually processing, connecting, correlating ideas, and learning what I actually thought about my thoughts, which was helpful. So yeah,
that's cool. I like that. What, Brad, couple final questions. We'll wrap up. We've got one, we got a new segment, y'all. We're bringing in questions from the audience. So this question is from Brooke. Says, as an entrepreneur myself, I'm curious, what was the most unexpected lesson that you learned from writing a book versus starting a business? And did any part of the book writing process catch you off guard or surprise you compared to launching a company?
Yeah. Look, I think when you're taking whatever creative endeavor you're doing, you're literally taking the unknown and making it known. So as I said, everything's created twice, first in your mind and then reality. And a book's no different. I mean, you start off with an idea. I had kind of a basic idea of what I wanted to do, but how it actually turned out is better than I initially thought, just based upon the creative processes and getting in the process and the juices flowing and like, oh, we could do this and that. And oh, this story. Oh, I forgot about that. Here's the other thing I've learned about me, and maybe it's unique to me, is that my mind is really good for coming up with ideas. It's terrible at retaining them. So the book process actually forced me to really recall a bunch of things. Fortunately, I had been journaling, and I highly recommend if you don't journal, you should, because you just want to capture life. And even you'll be amazed at just trying to remember last week. Like it is a surprising part of our humanity that is a bit that just needs to be supplemented. And I think a journal is a great way to do that. But I don't think that it's anything really different than a business. It is businesses are ideas. They start with an idea, they start with a thesis, and then it's a series of experiments to see if you can actually prove it through. And, kind of using Eric Ries's language, you either persist or pivot, or maybe you put a bowl in it and shut it down. It's up to you. But it's a series of just trial and error. And there's going to be more error than success. You just have to recognize that going in, that when we see success, we're only seeing the polished, shiny surface level stuff. Beneath that is a whole bunch of layers of crap and problems and things that didn't work out that you rarely hear about. And there's also something called survivor bias, right? Where you only hear from the survivors. Behind the survivors, there's a whole bunch of people who didn't make it. But I think it's encouraging to know that it's possible, and that if you're willing to just persist and continue to lean into the possibilities, that you can eventually land at a place where you get it right at the right time.
That's good. What would you say is your parting piece of advice, Brad, for the Brad of years ago before you decided to write this book, and maybe the other Brads out there who are thinking about writing and publishing their first book?
I would say what my father used to say to me, and still holds true. Don't despise the process for what it'll make of you. The process is how you it's part of the perfection of you. You are an ongoing work in progress. We all are. I haven't arrived yet. Writing this book isn't like mean like I've got it all figured out. I'm still learning. In fact, I've got new ideas since this book came out that I'm still kind of like, or I'm changing some of my beliefs, even just in terms of new discoveries about myself and the way that the world shows up and I show up in the world. So don't despise the process. It is a part of you becoming. We're not human doings or human havings. We're human beings. Therefore, the most important thing for us to be thinking about is who do I need to become? Who's the person I need to evolve into that can write a book, who can, build a business, who can make impact for my family and my community.
That's cool. Well, where can people, Brad, go to buy the book, to find out more about you, what you're up to, whatever would be most helpful?
Sure. If you want to go and find out about me, you can go to my website, which is bradpedersen.com. And that's all E's as in echo and D's as in delta, because most people spell it wrong. So I'll just give you that as a quick shortcut. And the book is startupsantabook.com. And if you go there, the first chapter you can download for free. I also did a number of videos. Actually, my pastor and I, we have a whole series of videos together that just unpack some of the lessons from each of the chapters. And I think it's a really, I think some of those videos would be really helpful because it's telling the stories behind the story, like even going deeper into what happened. And he asked some great questions, some questions that actually at moments made me emotional and uncomfortable, which was actually the whole point.
That's amazing. Well, guys, check out the book, startupsantabook.com. Obviously the book, Startup Santa, it is just launched. By the time you are seeing this interview, it is officially live. It's been fun. We've been able to work with Brad on kind of the final mile of this book at selfpublishing.com. So if you're selfpublishing.com author, definitely buy Brad's book. We want, let's support one of our own and let's blow this thing up. It's going to be really, really, really big and really, really good. So buy the book, share it with someone, startupsantabook.com. And then our new segment that we've got with questions live from the audience. If you want us to have one of your questions in a future episode, submit that. All you have to do is leave a comment on one of the episodes on our YouTube channel or leave a review on the podcast with your question. And that's how you could submit for the future. Brad, you're the man. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you guys for all you've done to support me in this journey. It's been awesome working with your team, and it's great to know there's other Canucks who actually are part of your larger cohort. So it's amazing.
Well, hey, we're just getting started. As we talk about in the program and in my book, it's the 1 year launch, not the 1 week launch. So I know you're doing a lot. I know it's probably like the last thing you want to hear right now, being in like 50 bajillion podcast interview mode before the book launches. But we're excited to keep supporting you over the next year. And guys, grab a copy of the book. Thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of the Self-Publishing School podcast. I know there's so many places that you could be spending your time. There's other podcasts that you could be listening to, YouTube channels that you could be watching. So thank you so much. It means the world. Now, I want you to do 3 things right now if you found this episode helpful. I don't know if you know this, but we've got a YouTube channel. It's a companion channel to this podcast. All the video versions of the episode are on the YouTube channel. So number 1, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Number 2, if you're listening to this podcast wherever, whether this is Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Number 2, I want you to subscribe to this podcast right now so you don't miss a future episode. And then number 3, this is probably the most important, leave a review on the podcast. All right, reviews are super important and help this podcast get discovered by other people. So number 3, leave a review on the podcast. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next episode.